Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to look at a way you could replace your traditional PowerPoint slides with visual storytelling using some clever tricks in vMix and a little bit of scripting to make a presentation into more of a story journey that can engage people as opposed to put them to sleep, which is the typical PowerPoint dilemma we run into. But before we get to that, I'd like to invite everyone. If you have any questions, have any comments, please just post them below and we'll try to get to all of them during the show. Also, if you'd like to join us live on air, we do have a link in the show notes and here on the screen. So feel free to connect, and somebody from the studio will get you on to join us. So let's get started. Uh, what I'd like to do is just show you what I'm talking about, and then we can dive into how we executed on this. So this is your sort of typical, you know, product launch type of uh, situation where there's, in this case, a new medical device that you wear on your wrist and it relays health information. So if you were doing this now as a something you wanted to do as a presentation, as opposed to just having slides, you could do something where you start to navigate through a series of sort of stitched together dioramas that let you move through all the details you want to talk about, but keeping them all connected with a particular flow. And one of the things that you'll notice is that we also had things like zoom ins and zoom outs and other things in that. So this is more than just sort of positioning a camera across a large image. It's actually giving you more granular control over where you want somebody's attention to focus while still preserving the larger image. And what we actually are doing here is this. This is our image. So it is a very large image, relatively speaking. I think it's 5760 by 1080. So it's about three times the width of a 1920 screen, which is what we're streaming in here. So this gives you a fairly large palette, but it also means that you have to start sort of zoomed in three times to get to this. So before I go into more detail on how we set this up in vMix, let me just jump into the comments for a second here. So we have you demand from a frosty Friday. Yes, I think everybody on the East Coast and up north is having a frosty Friday. It's been bitter cold and looks like it's going to be that way for the next week. So thanks for joining. Uh, and William, thank you for joining. We really appreciate it. All right. So let's get started by jumping into vMix, and we'll go through a little bit of how we have this all set up. So in this vMix, this might make it a little easier. We only have three main inputs, and then a sort of a fourth input that is basically a kludge that we have to do to read data. So what we have as input one is this full diorama. And that's going to be the entire sort of canvas that we're going to be painting on or navigating through to do this exploration of a topic. Uh, then we have these next two, which are panel A and panel B. So the key to doing what we do is we are using positioning information, which I'll get to in a second. We are setting panel A to where we are currently, the live video, and panel B is where we want to navigate to next, and then we're doing a merge. So we use these two panels together to create that dynamic flow, and that's how that's done. And how we know where we want to go, that is what we do with this fourth input, which is control data. And what this input does is it maps a set of variables. Let me actually just see. I can probably pop this up over here. Oh, excuse me. So we have three pieces of information that we sort of show that we use to show particular areas. We have an X position, a Y position, and then a zoom factor. So these three pieces of information are what we're reading from our Excel spreadsheet. So we have Excel, which basically has all these in, and we are using Data Source Manager to map this to these fields inside of this title that we just overlaid here. And that's how we know where to navigate. So if I go over and I'll pull this down and then go into Data Source Manager, which will give you a better sense. So this is it. So this is where we've read everything and we have the X position, Y position, and zoom information. And so we have this set up for every one of the uh, stops we want to make along this stitched together diorama. And I just have a little comment so I can remember what we have there. And so this is what we are doing specifically when we navigate this way is we are just using shortcuts to select which row of data we want to read from this Excel file. And then we have a script that we use to pull that data out of the title because it automatically populates once you bind things to the title. And just so you can sort of see more clearly, for each one of these, I have so the text here. This is just coming from Data Source Manager. So we're coming and saying, what is it that I want to pull in to this particular value in my title? So it's a very traditional vMix model for mapping data to the title. But because there's no way in vMix to read data directly, to query that in a way that I could use, you have to do this indirectly where you populate it inside of the title. And that's done by this binding. And then when I change my data row, I can then run a script and that will read that data and let me use it in scripting. And that's exactly what we're doing here. So it's a very simple vMix setup. And before we get to sort of looking at the script in more detail, one of the things that I could have done, and that would, be a valid way to do this, but less flexible, is I could have just gone in and done PTZ control. So if I were to go and open this here, there are PTZ settings. So I could actually go in and just do a virtual PTZ and then create different inputs at different locations. And I could sort of zoom and position what I want. The challenge with that, if you were to take that approach, is that first, all of those then need to be individual inputs. And second, it's much harder to change or tune that dynamically. If I, want to do stuff, I got to go in and add new inputs. And if I need to bind those to keys or to make it easy to uh, walk through the slideshow, then that all would need to be modified. So I recognize that that's a possible way you could do this without scripting or with minimal scripting and shortcuts. But I think I wanted to put a way together that gave you more flexibility and could let you be a little more dynamic with how you could set things up, modify them, or add things on the fly without changing up your vMix preset. So that's sort of put that on the side just to make sure. So the model that we're using for this is actually fairly straightforward. The base model is that we have our live position, what we're showing on screen, as our panel A, and that's in program. In panel B, over here, that's where we're going to go and apply whatever data row that we want. And we're doing that through a script. So I functionally, I am just going, and I'll show you the shortcuts. I am just going and I have left and right arrows to pull the next row or the previous row. And so that gives me the ability to select the row I want. And then I have a script that will actually run and do the following. It'll take and apply all those positions to the panel B. And that will let this panel B move to the new location. It then does a merge between these. So that will create that dynamic movement. Uh, I have something that it didn't work perfectly for the way I wanted to, but I'm just put it in there. Inside the script, I also try to calculate how fast should that merge take place, over what duration. And that's sort of based on how far it's traveling. So you don't want to turn and say, if I'm going from the very beginning to the very end of this, it should take the same amount of time as if I'm going from one section of it to an adjacent section where it's a much smaller move. So I tried to do something that calculated. It didn't work exactly the way I wanted to, but just so you understand sort of the intent behind that, I tried to make it align more with the amount of movement going on. Uh, but once that move takes place, then what I do is I wait for 100 additional milliseconds to make sure everything's settled. I apply those same new coordinates that are now in panel B to panel A, and then I cut panel A in and move panel B back to preview. So I effectively do a complete loop. I put the modified, move the modified into program, and then I go and take my normal main view, set that up to reflect this modified version, move that back to program, and I'm back basically back at the start. Panel A has my live view, panel B has a mirror of my live view and is ready to take the next set of coordinates to repeat the cycle. So it's a fairly straightforward model that we're using. So before I get into the script itself, I had a couple more people have jumped into the comments. So uh, Bowles Promo, thank you very much. Grateful to have you here. Thanks. Okay, Trevor, just found you really helpful with initial setup for new business process to offer live produced meetings. Excellent. I'm glad we could be helpful here. So thank you for joining. Really great to have you. Okay, so now let me switch over to, let me see. Yeah, so let's switch over to our code over here. And a lot of stuff is, basically framing up what we talked about. We're setting up the names of the inputs for the two panels and the control data. That's the GT title that we are taking the coordinates into. And then we have things for distance and duration. These are things that I was doing to try and optimize the travel speed for when something moves across the screen in the merge. So that's set up. Here's the first thing, which plays off of what we talked about last week. And I don't have to show it here, and you could use whatever you want. What I did was I used the function to turn on something. In this case, uh, solo on the audio for the data input. This doesn't do anything technically, but this is something that I can pick up using an activator inside vMix. So if I have a button on a Stream Deck that says launch the script, so it's running, it will turn around and light this up and turn it red. I can basically set something up with the activator so I know the script is running. Don't press the button again and interrupt the script. And then I do at the end, I turn solo off, which would re-trigger the activator to go back to green. So it's safe to press. So these are the sorts of things that we talked about before. I just wanted to put this in here so that sort of mentality about situational awareness carries over as you look forward. So now we're just doing a lot of the traditional vMix scripting stuff. We're pulling everything out for the vMix XML. And now we're pulling in data from the individual nodes that we have. So we are, basically getting everything that's in basically panel A and pulling that in as a node. This way we can see all the coordinate information and everything else there. And we have exception logic, things that we put in here to make sure if something doesn't work, we exit cleanly and let the operator know. So we're doing this the same for each one of the panel inputs. And one of the things I did mention is that in order to make merge look smooth, what we're doing is we are taking the panorama and placing it on layer one. inside of each one of the inputs in panel A and panel B. And so that merge is taking place between the layer ones on both of those panels. And that's how you get that smooth scroll. So that's what we're pulling out. We're pulling out what's in uh, overlay one is what they call it, but it's the first layer inside of the input. And, based on this, if we don't find it, we just say, okay, well, let's just default to 0 because, there is nothing there that we can really work with. And this makes sense because unless you've changed the position, when we're looking for the X position, unless you've changed that, it doesn't give you a pan X. So this would normally fail with just like an unmodified uh, X position. So this is just something, it's a vMix quirk. I'm not sure why they decided to not expose it all the time, but this is something that you will see that when you read a XPan, you will not necessarily find it if it hasn't moved it off. It's just set to 0. So we just do this, and basically we're just pulling out what the current position is. And if there's like a comma or something else in there between values, it is just pulling this out and saying, okay, we're just going to make it into a period. It's just a special cleanup that we do, but we pull the value. And so we are getting the current X position, and we're doing the same thing. We're once we have this information, we are then able to basically go in and pull all the target data out, start to set things up. So that X position is what we're using to know how we want to set the duration for the move. How far along the X axis am I moving? So that's what we use that for. So now we're reading the target data, and this is what's coming out of the GT title that we set up. And again, very similar stuff. We're pulling out the single node data, and we're getting this. We're specifically asking for panx.text. And if you remember, inside of the title, I have the names of them, and it's panx is the name of the field with the X position. Pan Y is the name of the field with the Y, and zoom is the name of the field. So all we're doing is we're going into that GT title, the XML in about that GT title, and we're asking for these 3 specific values. And that's all we have to do. These values are automatically updated through Data Source Manager and the title editor binding those to these named values. And so we're just pulling all of these in. This is where we calculate the duration. As I said, I'm not particularly happy with how this came out, but this is something you could think about. And we're just using this to basically figure out how far we're traveling and how much time it should take. So that's us setting up a max duration, a merge duration for this. And we set it up for a minimum of half a second. So even if it's a tiny move, it just has a slow pan to it. So after that, then we are going to come back and say, we have our target X, Y, and Z. So we are pulling those into, this is where we're going. And that's all based on everything we pulled out from the title. And then we are now just setting them. So we're doing this now on input B, because I said we start with input B and then we do the merge. So we're setting the pan X, the pan Y, and the zoom on the first layer for input B. And that's everything we just read. And then we make sure that input A is actively in program and input B is actively in preview, because we want to make sure that if we're going to do this merge, that if it was switched out, it would look, funny. You just would have something sort of merging, but not necessarily being on screen. So we actually set this up so that it forces everything into the correct A and B. And then we execute the move, which is just the merge for the calculated merge duration. And as I mentioned, we wait 100 milliseconds after that, and we then set input A now to those exact same positions and do a cut direct. And that's basically, oh, excuse me. And that's basically all the logic that we have here. At this point, we just sleep for half a second, sort of let everything settle. And then I just make sure that we set input B to the preview, the panel B to the preview. So that gives us that, make sure that we have A live and B in preview. And this is just catching the exception. If we had anything wrong, it would just turn around and tell us the message. And then this is a new construct that I edit. It's called finally. And what this will do is when something is concluded, no matter whether it was errored out or not, it'll finish with this block of code. And so what we're doing is turning that solo off. So if we were using a vMix activator, it could go back and turn the button press for launching the script back to green, so you know it's safe to press. So that's the whole logic around all of this. And I think the key thing here is that inside of vMix, there's a lot of capabilities around zooming. And it's something I just wanted to touch on. It's actually more than you realize. If you looked at, let me go over to the vMix screen for a second. If I were to, uh, we'll go in here and we'll look at layer one, and I'll edit this. So if you look here at the zoom levels that I have for this, uh, right now it's at 4.8. So if I were to try to do something here, the most you can go to is 5. And so this is just a little smaller than that. But one of the things that you can do that isn't obvious is if I am inside of an API call. So when I go and set the zoom, so in my API, I had set layer 1 zoom. I can put in basically any value that I want into that zoom string, and it will work. So you're not limited to the 5, the maximum of 5. And this is really important because say you wanted to do a 4K production, the zoom that you would need if these were all in 4K would be fairly, fairly hefty. We're already at 3. So our ability to zoom real deep into something, especially at that 4K resolution, would be limited. So if you was capped at 5, you could do sort of a little push in, but nothing where you could really zoom in like I did to the screen on the when we were in the cloud section. I zoomed in just to that one monitor. That's something that took like a zoom of 8 to get in. So you can push pretty far in using the APIs. So that gives you another element here that you can, consider in terms of flexibility. So I know this was a shorter show, but I hope everybody found it interesting. Before we jump into the post show, I just want to see if we have any other comments today. So, Barry Scott, thank you. Yes, I am doing well. So thank you for asking. I'm really glad to have you here. William, thank you. Yeah, it's fun to try and think of different things to cover. And that's the great thing about vMix. There's so many possibilities inside when you start to work through it. And there's just a lot of, production things we can focus on. So looking forward to having you join me for more in the future. Thanks. Surf's up. Thank you. Thank you for joining. Great to have you. All right, then. So why don't we call this a wrap for today's show? We will do another show probably in 2 or 3 weeks. We're a lot of variability here with everything we got going on the business side, but definitely want to keep these shows on a fairly regular basis. So we'll have another show in 2 or 3 weeks. If you can join for the post show, that would be great. If not, take care, be well, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Otherwise, I'll see you in a couple of minutes. Hello and welcome to our post-show hangout here. So, like I said, this is interesting because I'm always looking for things that we can do that are cool. But and I'm always open to suggestions as well. But this is one of those things where I was thinking I have so many people talk to me about slides and slideshows and how rough that is on people. But I know for a lot of people, if you are doing these types of things as a service where you're doing live streaming for events and other productions, having something like this and your offering where you could sit there and go, I could design some of these things and give you a more interesting way to basically take your PowerPoint slides and package them around more detail, but with more of a story behind it. I think that would be cool. And that really everything that you do, if you think of every show or anything else, there is a story arc to it at some level. It can be a technical story, uh, or it can be more of a human story, an engaging story at a personal level. But the things that connect with people usually involve stories of some kind. And what keep people engaged is that sense of I'm going along a path and I'm in the middle of a journey. And that's what we wanted to capture here. How do you package that in a way that can replace slides and sort of talk about the journey of whatever the topic is that you're trying to cover in a more traditional way. So, all right. So let me see. We uh, Spatial Octa says he's honored to have the show named after him. So yes, spatial storytelling. Yes. Well, that was kind of, I was trying to think of a term for that. So yes, you can certainly you can take ownership, but I need at least to have an open copyright to use it. So thank you. So I see that we we're still doing scripting. So, Joshua, thank you for that. And I love having these types of shows where we can do that. What I'm trying to do, because I've seen, just we watch, analytics and everything that come from these shows. And usually when I dive deeply into scripting, people sort of drop off. So what I'm trying to do is cover the script first logically so people have context around what we're doing. And then I'll move through the script fairly quickly just to sort of point out the blocks that line up with the logic. And then the scripts are always available online. So we always have a link to the show assets that we publish. So if somebody wants to go through, we can make it available. But hopefully this is working better for people, that it's a more usable and more interesting way to do this in a live show. So thanks, Joshua. Uh, I think I see. Let's see. A Matrix reference. Oh, yes. Thank you. Uh, yes. So we do have some interesting ways to look at navigating through all of this. But yes, I get the reference. So thank you. All right, and yeah. Excellent. Thanks. Yeah, and I know there is a lot of code, but that's what I said. Hopefully, the way we're doing this now, where we are moving that code into a very quick code overview with time spent on the logic behind it, and then just making that available. Hopefully, that works for everybody. But okay, so that's really everything for what I had planned for today. Uh, I do want to let everybody know I am getting ready for our next season, which will probably be starting season 6. Will start at the end of March, sometime of this year, as we wrap up. And there will be some fairly big changes that we have in mind. What I'm planning right now is that we will be doing the bulk of the shows that we do as pre-recorded, but more highly produced. And we will then intersperse those with live shows that will cover anything we did in these pre-recorded shows, as well as add a couple of new topics or other things that maybe additions to what we covered in the produced shows. And the goal is twofold. One of them is that we want to be able to do more animations and other things to explain more complex topics in a way that becomes more accessible, but topics that are important, things like understanding, video transport across the internet. That's not an easy thing to just sit here and talk about. And again, doing slides and other things where they're just still images doesn't necessarily communicate really what's going on effectively. So that's the first thing. And the other thing is, I know we have a lot of our viewership is post show. So it's done sort of on search and discovery. And for a lot of people, the live format in when they're not live is almost exclusionary to them. They feel like I'm left out. There's a lot of conversation, a lot of intros that go around the content that's being delivered. So it becomes less effective for that segment of the market where people are looking, saying, I want to understand this and I want to follow this, but I don't want to, deal with, going through, you know, an interactive space that we have in the show traditionally when they're not a part of it. So we're trying to balance this by saying we'll do more pre-recorded. We can be more to the point, more direct, cover the material, and then intersperse live shows. So that's the goal for what we want to do for season 6, and hopefully that will work well. But as always, your feedback is critical to us. So, all right, before we wrap up, I think we may have a few more comments here. So, thank you for joining, and suggest ideas as well. If there are things you'd like to see, like us to cover, always love to have you, you know, put those out, and we'll see what we can do. Uh, so Bowles promo was asking if they could see the transitions again that we had. So yeah, so I'd be happy to do that. Let's put that up. So basically, let me get over here. So the way we have this is, again, these are the merges that are taking place. So as we sort of slide around, this is just moving from one piece of the image to the other. And this is where we actually did the zoom in to sort of 8x, where it pushes all the way into that. And this is just based all on using positioning and merges between the different segments. And it just gives you that sort of sense of I'm going along a path, I'm tracing a route. And, if you have this is done at 1080, so, there's not a lot when I zoom in, you're losing that resolution. But if I did this at a higher uh, pixel density, you could do those zoom ins and it could look really clean and sharp. So different ways to think of that. But hopefully that gave you some ideas. So Joshua was saying, I've definitely solved a lot of problems with scripting that you just can't out of the box do in vMix. So it's super helpful to have that option in. And yep, I'm really glad that you find this stuff useful. And always, like I said, if you have ideas for scripting or things that you'd like us to cover, uh, just post them. We have a Facebook group that you can just post whatever you'd like in there, and we'll definitely try to integrate that into our editorial calendar for coming shows. So thanks, Joshua. All right, then. I think we are probably at a good break point. So thank you, everyone, for making the time. I really appreciate when you join us live. And as I said, we'll be back in 3 or 4 weeks with another show. So until then, well, if you're here in the Northeast, be warm, be safe, be well, and I'll see you then. Take care, everyone.